We'll probably have more people joining. We're usually pretty lazy, especially on such days as today. So today our guest speaker is James Thomson, joining us as the Chief Strategy Officer at Buybox Experts, an agency that's focused on helping people build their brands on Amazon. And I think James would love to tell us more about this. So James, thank you so much for joining. Do you want to add anything? Do you want to properly introduce yourself? I've probably done super poorly. So,
Dimitri and Nada, thank you both for having me on today. I never thought 10 years ago that I would ever be talking to a group of entrepreneurs or students that wanted to be entrepreneurs. I didn't really understand what being an entrepreneur was all about. I had the opportunity to do about 20 years of corporate jobs, and that's all very nice and well, and it's good to have that kind of background. But after a number of years being a management consultant, being a banker, and then going to work for Amazon for a number of years, I left to become an entrepreneur. And becoming an entrepreneur was really scary because I threw myself into the complete unknown. What does it mean to first and foremost create a job for yourself, but then actually build a business that may eventually be of value to somebody else that they want to buy it from you? I had the opportunity to build one business and sell that a couple of years ago. And today, my business partner and I run a 200-person agency. Never thought that I would be running an agency this big, but we decided that we could take our skills and start helping people. And out of being able to help people, we needed more help. So we hired people. We hired some more people and some better people and more expensive people, and eventually got better clients who paid us more money so that we could afford to hire even more people and invest in software, and invest in rent and things like that. And now we run the largest Amazon agency in the US. And it's exciting, but it's also a ridiculous amount of responsibility. So to everyone who is thinking about what does it mean to be an entrepreneur, one of the most important things that I've learned as an entrepreneur is I spend very little of my time actually doing what I thought I was going to be doing as an entrepreneur. So many of us get started as entrepreneurs because we have specialized skills, and we say people want to hire us for those skills. The problem is once you start to grow and make your business bigger and bigger, you spend more and more of your time doing administration. And so I have to work really hard every day to find ways to continue to do at least a part of what I got into being an entrepreneur. I have to work hard to make sure I keep going back to that. And that's exciting, but it's also a mindset that I didn't really appreciate when I got into being in business for myself and then having to hire people and take on the responsibility of managing other people. I was thinking to myself something that Quinn had said during his introduction. Why get into business school? Why get into banking and so on? I did my MBA almost 25 years ago, and back then people out of business school did one of two things. They either went to banking or they went to consulting. Well, now they go to e-commerce. They go work for Amazon. In fact, the crazy thing is when you look at where the very top grads from business schools are going, yes, some of them still go into finance and some of them still go into consulting, but it's actually getting harder and harder for those industries to hire the best students, because the best students end up at places like Google and Amazon and so on and so forth. So there's good money to be made. There's fantastic career opportunities to be had in the e-commerce space. When I was doing my MBA, we had two professors at our school who were telling us these crazy ideas that one day you could buy stuff on the computer. Like, what the heck are you talking about? I mean, those are like crazy academics. And then a few years passed, and started to see you could buy CDs online. You're like, okay, that's cool. But now you can pretty much buy everything and anything. And we've simply created a new way for consumers to be able to buy stuff, for consumers to be able to shop and find things and to learn about products. So I feel like I'm accidentally in this cutting edge industry, but it's all because, who really wants to be in retail? Well, it turns out it's not just retail. It's a new form of commerce, and it's pretty cool to be doing this kind of thing now, going on about 15 years. So That is my very long-winded introduction. Thank you, Dimitri.
No, thank you for that. The more you speak, the more value we have, so it's perfect. So my question to you guys, I guess, is the why do you think the e-commerce is such a breakthrough right now? Why do we see such enormous growth levels today?
Well, even before COVID, e-commerce is a very efficient way for people to find products, to learn about products, to figure out if products are even in stock. And when I was growing up, once a year, the white pages and the yellow pages showed up at our doorstep. And if you wanted to find something in your town, you literally had to pick up the phone and start calling places and say, hey, I want a pair of Levi's men's jeans. Do you have it in my size? Oh, just a minute. Let me go and check. Talk about ridiculously inefficient. And if it wasn't in stock in the first store, the second store, the third store, you had to decide, am I prepared to go into one of these stores and order it with the expectation that it might take 3 to 4 weeks for it to arrive? Fast forward 40 years, and here we are in a situation where if you want something, not only can you figure out who's got it, but you may even be able to get it delivered to you in the next 15 minutes if you're willing to use one of these services. I mean, it's a instant gratification kind of world, and e-commerce is one of the ways in which we can instantly gratify ourselves. So that part's really exciting from the perspective of living in a consumer world. Stuff is available quickly. You can figure out if it's available in your size and your color. If it is available, you can start to shop across sites to see who's cheaper. You can save money and have what you want very, very quickly. I love that concept. It does get to be a little bit ridiculous. I mean, try raising children and explain to them, you have to save up, you have to wait. You can't just have it whenever you feel like it. We kind of live in a have it whenever you feel like it kind of world now. And then, of course, COVID, changed the way that consumers had to shop. And for a lot of consumers who hadn't shopped online or hadn't shopped online for certain types of products, this past year has been a forcing function where they're now saying, okay, I've never bought jeans online. If I need a pair of jeans, I have to buy them online. How do I shop for certain types of products? So the other thing that's really cool that's happening in e-commerce is there's a ridiculous amount of money flowing in by way of investors buying up companies that launch products on marketplaces like Amazon. So I work with a lot with private equity and some of these new investors that are buying up these brands and literally throwing billions of dollars at what would otherwise be constituted as small startup brands. And a lot of these guys are making a lot of money by selling their businesses. One of the things that I didn't really understand until I got into being an entrepreneur is, for many people, they start off being an entrepreneur where what they're really doing is they're creating a job for themselves. And that's fine to create a job for yourself, but that's not really a business that you can sell. Because for a business to be sellable, you basically have to distance yourself from the business. You have to make yourself replaceable. Well, if you're a specialist in a certain area and people hire the company that you've created because of you, then at some point, if you decide to exit, is there really anything to sell? Well, in a situation where you can create jobs for yourself, for other people, but also you can make yourself irrelevant, now you've got something that you can sell. And a lot of these new investors that they're popping into e-commerce, I mean, they're spending a lot of money. And quite frankly, as a company that is in the space, we can make far more money by selling our business than actually continuing to operate it for years and years to come. And so that's the peculiar situation that every entrepreneur has to ask himself or herself is, at what point have you created enough underlying asset that you can sell it to somebody, leave that headache behind, let somebody else run the business, take the money off the table, and go and do the next thing you want to go do. So, and quite frankly, if you're really an entrepreneur, chances are you've got 3 or 4 things you're working on, not just one business. So you sell one business and you say, okay, that's great. Now I've got a little bit more time to focus on the other 3 businesses, or I've got time to start a 4th or 5th business. And that part's really exciting, working with entrepreneurs who can't stop at one idea. They've got to have 3 or 4 different things happening. And before you know it, you end up with this whole collection of hopefully interrelated businesses.
Okay, thank you. It's a very wonderful insight. And I've been thinking about this too, about like what is the end point like of the entrepreneurship? Because when you put yourself all into that, you're just generally creating another job for yourself. You're just deciding, okay, I will not go for corporate, but I'll just create a job for myself.
Right.
So what advice would you give for entrepreneurs who are starting something? What should they think about or work on to like what systems they have to develop in order to make their business sellable or make it function without themselves?
Long before you make it sellable, the first decision that I had to make when I left corporate America, the first decision I had to make was, what on earth do I know how to do that somebody's going to pay me money for? And you say, well, I know how to do a bunch of stuff, but I assume a bunch of other people know how to do that stuff as well. Why would somebody pay me to do that? And then I got a call and somebody said, oh, actually, can you freelance for me and do these things? I thought, you're going to pay me for that? And then they told me how much they're going to pay me to do this on the side. And I'm like, sure. And I started doing this and I realized, oh, the reason I'm being hired to do this is because things that I think are obvious to me aren't obvious to everybody else. Whether that's running an online business, whether that's, rebuilding a car, whether that's whatever your business is that you're looking to do, are you doing something that's in some way differentiable from what everybody else has to offer? It turns out there's a lot of people that are in corporate America that have good jobs and unusual skills, but they like the protection of the corporate job, and that's fine. Leaving corporate America, I didn't have any of those protections, and so I had to figure out, what am I going to do here to make a job for myself. And then in time, the next big decision was, at some point I needed to hire somebody. It's really scary when you hire your very first employee, because all of a sudden they're now your responsibility. You have to find work for them. You have to make sure you're bringing in enough money to pay them first. And then maybe at some point there's money left over to pay yourself. And I can tell you, in the first couple of years that we had employees, my business partner and I had a few months where we didn't get paid. Everybody else got paid, the rent got paid, the taxes got paid, but we didn't get paid. And that's really scary when you still have bills of your own that you need to pay. But at the end of the day, we got to the point where we said, oh, okay, whatever it is that we're doing, we have to figure out how to continue to scale this so that we can, drive our costs down, but also be in a position where whatever it is we're going to offer, there's enough customers out there that it's not going to be a big deal if we lose a single customer. Oh my gosh, our business is going to tank because we lost one customer. And eventually we got to the point where we had refined what it is we were offering. We kept refining and refining, figuring out, how do we make this attractive to enough people that we will continue to have lots of opportunity, continue to add new clients. And once we got that part right, then we were in a much better position to keep scaling our business. Hiring the second and the third and the fourth employee, that wasn't hard. It was really hard, that first employee. But then what happens is you get to a point where you've hired enough people that, oh my gosh, we need somebody who does HR. We need somebody who does payroll, because I can't do it in the evenings after everything else. And so you have to learn how to grow up and be a real company and start investing in infrastructure that you would never have when you first started. Just a quick aside, when I was at Amazon, the guy who was the SVP at the time, he encouraged everybody in his organization to go off and start an Amazon business. You should be a seller, sell on the marketplace, because you'll learn more about what it means to be an entrepreneur if you're forced to actually buy low and sell high. Well, it turns out buy low, sell high sounds all very nice and well, but when you don't really understand your costs, or you don't really understand which products make you more money or more of your sales, you very quickly can lose focus, and you're working really hard, but you're not really making any money. And so, as I think about how I've become a better entrepreneur, it's by having better and better tracking of the numbers that drive my business. What are the KPIs? What do I need to do to understand the costs, where the money comes in, where the money goes out, where I'm inadvertently spending money on things that don't matter, or where I'm spending money on things that do matter, but I didn't realize I was spending as much as I was. And so having proper accounting in place, looking at those numbers regularly, making adjustments, those were some of the hardest issues for me to get over. I have a math undergrad. I can't even count properly when I'm running a business. So how hard can it be? Well, it turns out it's actually really hard, because keeping track of what's happening at a macro level in your business often you have to step away from the day-to-day of, oh, my client needs this report, and oh, I need to write this up, and I need to talk to the client. But what about I need to figure out if I'm making any money? And that kind of stuff, having the process and the data to compiled to figure out whether you're actually doing something that's profitable, as ridiculously stupid as it sounds, a lot of the time you're working on stuff that actually doesn't drive any revenue. And so you got to figure out what's not driving revenue, and am I doing it for any reason other than revenue? Because if I'm not, I got to stop doing that. The problem was some of the stuff that I was doing that really wasn't driving a lot of revenue, I really liked doing. Well, at some point you have to ask yourself, do I have a hobby or do I have a job? Like, what's the point of this? When I get up in the morning to the time I go to bed, what am I doing here? If it's just to have a hobby, that's fine, but that doesn't pay for the mortgage. And so you got to rationalize, how am I going to spend my time? Because at the end of the day, it still is a job. Hopefully you enjoy doing what you're doing. And if you do enjoy doing what you're doing and you're good at it and it pays the bills, man, you're in a fantastic place. Because you're the boss of yourself, you're making money doing things you like. That's, like, to me, the entrepreneur dream. But it's actually hard to get to that point because it takes a lot of adjustments and a lot of re-examining sort of your expectations of, why am I doing what I'm doing here? I want to be an entrepreneur so I can make a lot of money. Okay, but if you decide to be an entrepreneur first and foremost to make a lot of money, don't be an entrepreneur. Go become an iBanker. And you'll be miserable, but you'll make a lot of money. If you decide to be an entrepreneur, then you've got to have something that you're offering where first and foremost you're doing it because you love doing what you're doing. And if you love doing what you're doing, as I've seen this with many of my colleagues who have built and sold many businesses, if you love what you're doing and you're good at tracking the data, the money will follow. And in fact, the money will follow potentially at levels you never expected. I started a business with my current business partner. We had another business beforehand. We never thought it was going to be a big business. Well, it turned into a multi-million-dollar business sort of overnight. But first and foremost, we were doing things that we loved doing. And then somebody said, you're really good at doing these things you love doing. We'd like to buy that business. We're like, you want to buy a business? This is worth something to somebody? They said, yeah, this is worth something to us. And so by being so focused on doing things that we enjoyed doing and having the data to make sure we were making the money, the money followed. We made our money in the end. It's just that we didn't go into that business with the initial expectation that we were going to make a lot of money. Let's do this because we'll make a lot of money. No, let's do this because it's something we enjoy doing and we know that we can make a living doing it, and we'll continue to grow that business. Sorry, Quinn, nothing against iBankers.
No,
I want to separate out. There are lots of ways to make money, and a lot of them are horrible, ugly. I was in banking, not iBanking, but I was in other forms of banking, and I never liked it, but I made a lot of money. But it's hard to take that business and it's hard to scale it.
Yeah.
Thank you, James. I hope Quinn will still be with us after this meeting.
Of course.
If it's not a secret, can we maybe dive into a case study from your business, maybe a client? What problems did they have, and how did BuyBox experts help them solve this problem?
So most of our clients to us, they're typically brands, and they want to sell more on Amazon, and they have no idea how to steer the boat to sell more on Amazon. In fact, they have no idea what the rules of the game are to sell more on Amazon, because it's not just as simple as let's throw a bunch of products on Amazon and see what sells. 15 years ago, you might have been able to get away with just throwing stuff on the wall and seeing what sticks. But nowadays, if you want to sell stuff on something as big as Amazon, not only are there at least 3 million other sellers on the site, a lot of them don't play fair, or a lot of them play by rules, that levels of ethics that I certainly would never want to play by. And so you have to ask yourself, what is it about the customers that I can do a better job of offering my products to them, and do it in a way where, first of all, they're going to see my product, because there's 50,000 competitors in the same space. How are they going to see my product ahead of everybody else's? And what am I going to do to put a better message in front of them around how my product can solve their problems? This is going to sound ridiculously cliche, but I can't agree with Jeff Bezos more than his saying around, start with the customer and work backwards. It's as simple as, if you want someone to open their wallet and give you money, you need to understand, what problem are you trying to solve for the customer? If you understand the problem you're trying to solve, and you understand how your product does a better job of solving that problem for the customer, chances are the customer will at least consider you as a possible solution to their problems. When I look at, let's put it this way, there's a lot of stuff on Amazon that is basically a widget with a package on it, but I have no idea how it's better or worse than every other product that's in the same category. And so for companies that say, I'm going to start a new brand and I'm going to throw it on Amazon and I'm going to make $1 million because I know how to do this. Well, if you don't start with the customer and you don't ask the question, what am I doing that aligns with what the customer is trying to solve? And how do I solve that problem more effectively than my competitors? If you can't answer those questions, or if you don't focus your business on those types of issues, then it doesn't matter if you have a better mousetrap than everybody else. If nobody wants to buy a mousetrap, I don't care if it's the best mousetrap in the world. So the conversations around many of our clients has to do with, are you building a mousetrap that solves a problem people care about? And are you solving the problem in a way that's better than everybody else that's already there? And so a lot of what we do are the mechanics around, how do I do a better job of explaining our products around the issues that customers are trying to solve? How do I do a better job of making sure that product is shown to consumers ahead of the 50,000 other companies in the same space? That's really what we do. At its very simplest level, the actual day-to-day mechanics of set up this ad campaign or, set up a product listing this way, those are just iterations of solving the same issue. But at the end of the day, you have to figure out what the customer wants and how you can deliver against that in a way that's better than everybody else.
That's awesome. Thank you for this advice. It's really how to become the most the customer centered, the same way as Jeff Bezos described it, to start with the customer, work backwards, and then figure out the way how you can. It's really about not selling your product, but bringing value to the customer, is how I understand what you are saying, right?
My very first entrepreneurial experience, as corny as this sounds, but my first entrepreneurial experience, my parents said if I wanted to make some money, I should have a lemonade stand. I was about 9 years old, and I had really favorable economics working in my favor. Basically, all the lemonade and the cups were free because my parents paid for it. But I still had to go out there and I had to figure out, how am I going to sell this lemonade to a bunch of strangers? Because it wasn't just the neighbors. Like, once the neighbors buy your first 4 or 5 cups, now you need actual strangers to buy your product. So how do I get a stranger interested in buying my cup of lemonade? Now, fortunately, there weren't 15 other kids with their own lemonade stands the same day that I was doing mine. So I didn't have that kind of competition. But I did have the competition that the neighbors could always go inside their house and just drink water. They didn't have to walk all the way down the street and give me money. But my dad, who's not an entrepreneur, I have to admit, he taught me something really important, which is, okay, now you've got them there, somewhat of a captive audience, to buy your not very good lemonade. How do you get them to give you even more money? What else can you sell them at the lemonade stand? Is there certain types of food or snack or candy that you can also sell them? It turns out, I sold way more money in candy, which was a very high margin business. I sold a lot more candy than I did lemonade, but everyone was like, oh, look, the cute kid's selling lemonade. And then they go over and then they drop a bunch of money on candy. Well, as a business person, I made way more money selling candy than I did doing lemonade, because I understood that if someone's prepared to spend money, they're not really looking to spend 25 cents and get 75 cents in coins back. If you can help them part with the full $1 or the full $2 and give them a bunch of other stuff, then you're in a better position. So I had to learn what it was that would motivate consumers to give me more money. And that was, many people grow up in entrepreneurial families and it all becomes sort of second second way of thinking. For me, it was a big learning that I didn't really understand until much later in life what it is that I was doing. But that's really what being an entrepreneur is about. Start with the consumer, understand what they're doing, find ways to get them to want to spend more money with you because you're solving more than just one problem. And then you're off to the races.
Okay, thank you for that. But let's come back to Buy Box Experts a little bit.
Okay.
How did you start this company? How did you get the idea? And like maybe some more details about what were the pains and gains of starting this company? Well, we see the gains now, but how did it actually start? You told that you had the time when several months you just had no revenue coming to you. And I think we would just love to learn more about this.
I'm sort of the accidental entrepreneur because I left Amazon because my wife was having our second child. I rarely ever saw my wife and my first child. And I said, you know what, life is too short to be in a situation where you're basically just living to get a paycheck. So I had a little bit of money saved up. So I said, I'm going to leave Amazon. I'm going to enjoy the birth of our second child. And then I'm going to figure out, what do I do? And as I mentioned, out of the blue, I started getting calls as soon as I left Amazon. Companies that I had been supporting when I was in Amazon started calling me saying, we see you've left Amazon and now we want to hire you to do whatever it is that might be beneficial to give us a small edge. I said, well, what is it you want me to help you with? I'm like, well, can you just be available to do consulting work? Just like get on a call with us a couple times a month. And we'll pay you several $1,000s a month to do that. Kind of like, yeah, sure. Do you have any other friends who want to pay me that too? Because that's a pretty good living. And I wasn't able to scale that, but I realized that there were a lot of people selling products on Amazon that didn't really understand what they were doing. They were throwing things against the wall, and some of it worked and some of it didn't work. And so at that point, shortly thereafter, I ended up meeting my business partner, and we said, we both had different types of Amazon specific skills. And we said, we can actually go to market and find companies that need help. And it turns out we could actually figure out which companies probably needed help and approach them and say, did you know that we can help you? And enough of them said, oh, okay, sure. And we basically help these companies not only learn the ways of Amazon, but also sell more and more product. And it turns out if you can help companies sell more product, they're happy to pay you more money. And if you keep growing their business, they're happy to keep paying you more money. And today, I mean, we have one client that's been with us for 6 years, I think. And they're at least 100 times bigger now than they were when they started with us. And they pay us at least 100 times more now than they did when we first started. It's great. We were learning back then, they were learning back then, but we figured out that not only did we have to grow them, but you can't just rest on your laurels. We had to keep finding new ways to find new growth to offer to them. And at that point, we started writing things down and saying, oh, what's the standard operating procedure for doing this kind of problem or this kind of problem? Before we knew it, there were many different types of companies with many different types of problems. We knew how to solve those problems. And so we could go to lots of different types of companies and say, you got that kind of problem? We know how to solve that. And that kind of problem? We know how to solve that. And so we started building a business by going after enough companies to pay the bills, but also enough companies that we could start to hire people, scale our business. And the really cool thing about scaling your business, even if you're not very profitable, if you scale your business, now you can start to specialize. And you can have a couple of people that do just this one area, a couple of people that do just this one area. But once you start to specialize, those people become really, really good. And so you have a team where you've got multiple groups of people that are all really good at very specific things. And we had been generalists for the longest time. And a generalist, unfortunately, is another way of saying I'm mediocre at a lot of stuff versus I'm really good at a couple of things. But we had a team of people now that were really good at a different one or two things each. And so our clients saw this team of experts. And it became a much better model at that point once we'd built enough skill to be in that position. And once we had that scale, then we could start to actually charge more money because everybody who was working on projects, on the parts of the projects they were working on, they really were really good at what they did versus just being these generalists. So it's okay to be a generalist for a while, but it's hard to scale a business of generalists who continue to be nothing but generalists, because then you're just basically a wish-wash department store of capabilities, which consumers don't get excited about that.
Thank you for this diving into the history of the company. We also saw, and I think it will be very interesting to mention, you're the first guest who have wrote and co-authored several books who come to our club. And we're hoping that you could talk a little bit about some of the books you wrote, for example, oh my God, I'm so sorry.
No, it's okay. I can talk about the books. I mean, it's important to understand, why do you write a book? Unless you're J.R. Rawlings, I mean, most people don't ever make any money writing books. I mean, there's only a very, very small percent of people that will ever write a book and make enough money to cover the cost of the book. For us, writing a book was a form of marketing ourselves, building our company brand, building our personal brand, and putting a point of view out there to people that even if nobody bought our book, guess what? We have published books that we can now send to prospects. And we send the books to all sorts of people who we want to have as clients. And by having a book, which is much better than just a little ebook, but by actually an actual book you can put in your hand. Yes, it's available digitally too, but the actual physical book, you put that in the hands of a prospect, they get excited and they're like, oh, you have a point of view? Oh, I can read this on a flight? Oh, okay. I don't have to agree with everything that's in the book, but here's somebody who's put their neck out and said, I have a point of view and I want to share it with you. And if you have a point of view on stuff that's complicated that enough people are trying to figure out, then the book becomes a vehicle for creating the perception that you're somehow an expert in those areas. We wrote one book and it did really well as a marketing tool. I think we probably lost about $18,000 when it came to the actual production costs of the book. But when you look at all the business we got back as a result of writing the book, it was a fantastic investment. And then we wrote another book on a slightly different topic for a slightly different audience. And again, we're never going to get rich on the royalties from the book, but the book becomes this very powerful, highly differentiated marketing tool that we can put in front of companies where, quite frankly, every time I get another copy of our book printed, that costs me like $6. Well, for $6, I can get in front of a CEO of a brand who might ultimately pay me $100,000, $150,000 a year to help drive their business. $6, $150,000 of billings. I'll do that all day long. Now, it turns out I have to give away a lot of $6 books to get one client who will pay me that, but that's still okay. Because quite frankly, I'm not going to buy bulletin boards or billboards on the side of the road. And I can only do so much Google advertising. So how do I differentiate myself? If everybody was writing books, then it might be a little bit different. But it turns out everybody's not writing books, or at least not books that are professionally edited and professional layout and all that kind of stuff. So the book is nothing more than a means to an end. And the means to an end is not to get rich on royalties, but to find effective ways to cut through the clutter of what all of our competitors do and be able to talk to in this case, prospects who otherwise would say, we've never heard of you. You're a small company. We don't know who you are. It's a way to basically look big. What's this expression? Fake it till you make it. Well, we're even as a big company, we're still faking it until we make it, because you're always trying to look bigger and more sophisticated than you might actually be. But at least gives you an opportunity for somebody to say, I'll give you 15 minutes. I saw your book. I'll give you 15 minutes. Tell me what you can do to help us. Just like we do tons of webinars. We run a podcast. We speak at conferences. We do tons of PR. All of these are different types of marketing vehicles to help not only get our name out there, but help to differentiate us from every other firm out there that might be doing a lot of the same kind of stuff that we would otherwise be doing.
Thank you. I didn't see books really from this perspective, so it's really thank you for this awesome idea. Actually, I have never thoughts, at least, about the books being this way of attracting more clients, giving yourself more credibility,
So,
and so on and so forth?
Dimitri, let me share something with you. The two things in the last 5 years that I have learned that are like not that complicated, but help to differentiate myself or my company. Number one, if you have something intelligent to say and it helps to solve prospects or customers' problems, write it down. If you're going to write it down, turn it into something significant, not just a 3-page ebook, but even if it's a small little book, or if it's a video series you put on YouTube, do something and do it well enough that it looks like you're not just in your basement with a little video camera. Like, spend a little bit of money, make it look nice. And by the way, I can self-publish books on Amazon. It costs me next to nothing. We hired my business partners in Salt Lake City, and we hired some of the film students from one of the local colleges who helped us film a bunch of stuff, and it cost us very little. And man, did it look good. Again, we looked more sophisticated, more knowledgeable than we probably were. But again, we were clever about how do you find ways to make things happen. So if you can create content and put it out there, there's lots of low-cost ways to do that today that you'll look good. The other thing I would say is I didn't really understand the power of LinkedIn for building my own brand until about 5 or 6 years ago. And it turns out anybody listening today can do exactly what I'm about to explain. As you start to think about where you want to be professionally, you may have 10 people that you're connected to on LinkedIn. Well, if you want to be connected to a lot more than 10 people, or more importantly, 100 people who are much more senior, much more experienced, who are not in your space yet, how are you going to break through to get connected to them? Well, if you have written things down, if you have videos, if you have books to offer, if you have a lot of this kind of content where you put original thought into something, you've properly produced it, properly packaged it, you now have an excuse to reach out to people and say, listen, I see you're a company, you do this kind of things. I've looked at your website. I can see you've got these kinds of issues. I have a point of view on that, and I want to share this with you, and I'll share it to you for free. Well, I typically, in any given week, I'll add anywhere between 50 and 100 people to my LinkedIn group. I've got something like 12,000 people who I'm connected to now. I have no idea who most of these people are, but I do know that they're the types of people that I want to be connected to, either because of the kinds of companies they work for or the types of job titles they have. And by actively spending time on LinkedIn every couple days and finding new people that I want to get connected to, I'm not just connected to them, I'm connected to their connections. And so it becomes very much a multiplier effect over time. Well, when the time comes that I want to do certain types of business endeavors, I was only 1 or 2 connections away from a bunch of people that I had absolutely no business being connected to. But I was able to start reaching out and say, can you introduce me to this person? People are like, oh, yeah, this guy, James, I don't know him very well, but he has a lot of really interesting things to say on this, this, and this. You should talk to him. And then I got connected to a bunch of other people. And so that's a way to do very efficient networking, but you have to have things to say. And I'm posting stuff on LinkedIn, I don't know, 4 times a week. It's not all my own stuff. Some of it I see an interesting article, and I don't just repost the article. I repost it with my point of view on here's how this is going to impact these types of customers or these types of people who have these types of problems. And what happens is people who are not my connections end up seeing it through their connections and then commenting. I send out an email to every one of those second and third connections to connect to me. Excuse me a sec. Just a second. Sorry about that. So this idea of, sorry, I get excited.
No worries.
This idea of building your network bit by bit by bit, you have to have something to say. There's so much noise out there. So even if you just start by taking other people's content, commenting on it, resharing it, reposting it, and then proactively going back and looking to get connected to everybody you don't know who chooses to comment on what you had to say. Chances are they're not going to comment on you just straight up resharing something. But if you have an intelligent point of view on something you saw, people will say, "You're right. I like that. Great. I want to connect with you because I want to get connected into your network." And then the next person's network, and so on and so forth. Before you know it, people are like, "Oh, James knows everybody." I'm like, I don't know everybody. I've just built up a network on LinkedIn that's connected to lots of other people and lots of other people. And so this is one of those things where, as college students, I would certainly encourage you to think about if there's certain areas you want to be in. Build a Google notification for different topics of articles as they come in. Just start reposting 2 or 3 of those a week with your commentary on, I saw this interesting article, this got me thinking about this and this and this and this. And before you know it, if you're not only posting stuff, but you're doing the back end of seeking to get connected to people who comment on your posts, you might have 100 people today who you're connected to on LinkedIn. If by the time you finish college, if you have 500 people, it quickly manifests itself into a much, much larger group. That just makes life a whole lot easier. The number of people that I've seen who are like, "Hey man, I got laid off during COVID, bad situation. Does anybody know companies that are hiring in this geography or these types of people?" Boom, boom, boom. All these people like, "Oh yeah, I know this. That's because these people have enough connections that you get the snowball effect of everybody basically trying to help each other out. But if you only have a couple people who are connected to you on LinkedIn, again, you got to ask yourself, what's the point of me being connected to people on LinkedIn? What's the point of me using LinkedIn? It is like the greatest tool imaginable if you know what it's for. It is not Facebook. It is not Instagram. Don't use it like that. But if you use it for making yourself look intelligent because you have intelligent things to say about business-related issues, you should do it. You should use it all the time. Before you know it, you'll be connected to some people, again, you have absolutely no business being connected to, but they're like, "That guy's smart. That lady's smart. They have good things to say. I want to hear what they have to say." So that would be one of my biggest learnings, having become an entrepreneur about 8 years ago, was that I didn't know anything about this, because in the corporate world I was always protected in the sense that I had a job, and tomorrow if I show up and do my job, I still have a job. As an entrepreneur, you're constantly looking for, where do I keep building my business? If I have to get another client, where's that next client going to come from? And so the hustle that comes with being an entrepreneur, these are easy things to do if you're disciplined about saying smart things, getting people to comment on your smart things, and then getting those people to follow you. And before you know it, you've got a huge network. I'm sorry about all the coughing. Sorry about that. I cough when I get excited talking about stuff.
Yeah, guys. Now you have the whole badass strategy on LinkedIn. Hope you guys taking notes. But I probably think that what you do have is questions for James. So that's what we want to have.
Great.
So we have 10 minutes left in the meeting. So I want to open the space for any questions from the audience. So feel free to raise your hand or unmute yourself and ask the question.
Please
I'll start
ask.
off.
Please.
Yeah. So I think with people like us, it's very easy to focus on the end result of building a company or building a business. We see, how many times did you fail, or did you have any major roadblocks into actually starting your company?
First of all, I had absolutely no idea what I was doing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how to do accounting. I know how much money was in my bank account to pay the bills while I was trying to figure out what I was doing and how to get people to pay me. But you're absolutely right. If you focus on the end goal, if you focus on the output, not the inputs, chances are you will mess up every time. The problem is the output is what's attractive. I want that. I want the Ferrari. I want the big house. Well, okay, but the road to getting there, if you're doing things you're good at and you've asked yourself the question, will customers pay me for this thing that I'm doing? Am I differentiated? Am I answering the questions in ways that are going to help them? If you solve those inputs first, your business will grow in unexpected ways. And you'll be like, holy smokes, we got a bunch of, like, we're actually profitable now, and we can afford to hire more people and buy software and have a nicer office and stuff like that. And so I was fortunate that I left Amazon. I had made some money at Amazon, definitely not enough to call it quits, but I had a little bit of time to figure out, okay, if you think of like, how long is your runway? Okay, it's 3 months, it's 6 months, it's 12 months. Okay, I gotta be frugal, and I gotta be nimble and figure out, how do I get enough clients that, I can extend my runway another few months. And it may not work out. Let's be clear, it may not work out. There was a point when I was a consultant, I said to my business partner, I said, are we nuts? Why are we doing this? We're literally making a fraction of what we could be making if we just took a corporate job. And he talked me off a ledge. He said, yeah, but we have the flexibility that if we see an opportunity, we literally in the next 2 hours can decide, let's go pursue that and let's go work through how to make that happen. You can't do any of that stuff in a corporate setting. So we decided to keep going at it. We sort of clogged along for a while, and it wasn't, what does success look like? Success has to be around, are you building something that's scalable, that's solving customer problems? If you do that, the money will come, the success will come, the connections will come. And by the way, if all along the way you're saying intelligent things and you're leveraging LinkedIn and you're using that as a way to, pursue getting speaking engagements at conferences or joining a panel discussion on a webinar, it's all about, you want to look smart without being obnoxious. How do you actually have intelligent things to say? And it's not just once a year you have something intelligent. You're actually thinking about, hey, this is a problem that my customers are having. I've got a point of view. And on any given week, I'll probably forward 12 to 20 emails or articles that I see. I'll forward them to people that I know, hey, I think this is something you'd be interested in. My most valuable professional contacts are people that are way better connected than I am. And I say way better connected, I mean the people they actually know hundreds of people by name, and they all know who these people are. I'm not that person. I'm an introvert. But you want to get connected to people because they trust you to continue to be intelligent and respectful of their contacts, and you just keep doing it. And as you do that, eventually you start making money, and you start realizing, oh, one day if I want a Ferrari or a big mansion, I may be able to do that. But if you start with, what's the fastest way for me to go make a bunch of money? Yes, go become an iBanker and be absolutely, completely miserable and basically be a slave for X number of years. And yeah, you'll get your money. And then you'll realize you have no soul left. Mm-hmm. If you want to do that, that's cool. But you won't be happy. And I realized as an entrepreneur, I had to have some basic sense of happiness in, listen, I'm awake for 16 hours of the day. I'm going to spend 10 to 12 hours of it doing whatever this thing is called my job. We were literally talking 75 to 80% of my awake hours are doing this thing. So if I like this thing and it's something that helps solve customers' problems, it will be enough motivation for me to keep doing this thing, to keep doing more of it. And then figuring out, how do I scale to do that in a way where I now have people working for me so you can start to make more money. But if I didn't like that thing that I started off, I was spending 75 to 80% of my time. At some point, I would just say, screw it, I'm done. I'm going back to corporate America. So I'm glad I worked for corporate America. I learned lots of stuff in a safe environment. I got a paycheck. I didn't have to worry about where the money was coming from. But at some point I said, I need to do something different where I have more control over the agenda of what I do for those 75 to 80% of my awake hours. And it was scary. It was no question it was scary doing that. But as I've done that, I have found unexpected personal success and financial success because I'm doing things I like doing, and I'm okay with it taking up 75 to 80% of my awake hours, Because again, I don't know what I want to be when I grow up, but I do know that what I'm doing right now is fun. It's not all fun, but it's enough fun to keep me doing this. I don't have a single corporate job where I said, this is fun. I have lots of corporate jobs. I'm like, this is safe. There's a big difference between this is safe and paying the bills and this is fun and there's potential. I never had a corporate job that had potential in the sense of, oh man, this is like mind freeing. We could do this or we could do this. I was never senior enough to be that guy. And to be that guy, I either had to go start my own business or spend, 25 years in the machine, slowly working my way up to be in a place where I could say, let's go chase that.
Definitely.
Thanks for your question.
Yes, of course. Thank you for your insight. I appreciate it.
And guys, come on, any other questions while we still have some time?
I have a question.
Please.
So you obviously have to take a lot of risks when being an entrepreneur, but what do you think keeps you motivated when things get tough?
Oh boy. Well, one of the most important parts of discipline as an entrepreneur I learned is that if you have some sunny days and you happen to come into, a little bit of a financial windfall because a client ended up paying you a lot of money, it's okay to stock it away because you are going to have rainy days later. And so I always think of it as for every 2 steps forward, I know there's going to be 1 step backwards. I just don't know where that 1 step backwards is going to be yet. And so if you take that mindset of let's save for that 1 step backwards that's inevitably going to happen, then when the 1 step backwards happens, it's not demoralizing. It's more of this is a bump in the road that I expect is going to have to happen periodically. And so it's hard to get that, to get to the point where you're at least a few steps ahead of where you need to be. But if you do get to that point, I had to learn how to not be in a position where like, hey, we're going out for dinner, spending a bunch of money. This is great. When tomorrow my client's going to quit and I'm like, oh crap, how am I going to make payroll? So living well within whatever financial range you create for yourself, so much of the stress of being an entrepreneur is around cash. How do you pay for your bills? How do you make payroll? How do you pay for rent? And so if you're disciplined about spending well less than what you could afford to, reduces the risk so much. So if you're fortunate enough to have enough seed money to get started with your business, you should be frugal and figure out how do we make the most of this. But as you start to see even some small successes, always be pocketing away some of that money because your stress level goes way down when the inevitable 1 step backwards happens. That would be my suggestion, Jenna. I mean, there's a lot of stress being an entrepreneur because you're not really sure what the path is. You don't have some manager saying, today's path is you're going to do this project. Instead, you're sitting there going, gosh, what do we have to do today? Like, how do we move the ball forward? One of the things that I do, and I've been doing this for at least 20 years, is every Friday, and I'll be doing this in about an hour from now, every Friday at the end of the week, I spend a few moments just thinking to myself, did I move the agenda forward this week? And some weeks I move the agenda forward a lot. And some weeks it doesn't move forward very much. And unfortunately, a few weeks, it's like, wow, that was a bad week. And I'm going to have to work extra hard to get us back on track. But if you have a kind of a vision of where am I going with this thing? And you're asking yourself, you're evaluating yourself, you're basically collecting data regularly on yourself to say, am I moving in the right direction or do I need to course correct a little bit versus just saying, I don't like my job. I don't like my job. I don't like my job. Okay, I'm quitting. Well, if you don't like your job, ask yourself that question early on and say, what is it that I don't like about what I'm doing? Okay, I as an entrepreneur, I have control over being able to make some of those changes. Well, maybe I should start offering this product or change offering this product. Or I got a horrible client I don't really want to keep. I'm going to get rid of the client and that remove my stress. Or I'm going to take a chance and try something new. The amazing thing about being an entrepreneur is you have much more control over what your journey looks like, whether you course correct, how fast you run, whether you take a step back. But in my mind, it's all about I need to reduce the stress in my life, which means I have to live well within my means And as a business, that means I can't spend all the money I have on, hey, let's get new laptops for everybody, or hey, let's go rent a building that's much more expensive than what we should be able to afford. Reduce the stress by managing cash really, really effectively. That's what I would say in terms of how to think about removing a lot of the negativity in your life.
Thank you. That really helps.
Okay, thank you guys for your questions. Thank you so much, James, for being here. We just want to respect your time, but the last questions that I hope you can answer for us is
sure.
Probably have still more questions that we would love to ask you or to connect to you and possibly talk more about the topics and motivation and starting a business. Where can we reach out to you?
I'm on LinkedIn. I'm really on LinkedIn in a big way. So you can find me, James Thomson, Thomson. My company's called Buy Box Experts, buyboxexperts.com. Find me first and foremost on LinkedIn. That's the easiest way to find me, and I'm happy to answer your questions if you're inclined to ask me more questions.
Okay, thank you. And Nada, can you please put the link to the chat so that people can
Yes.
go right away? So, okay. Thank you again, James, so much for coming. Thank you for just talking and I just want to call you Professor Thomson at this moment because of so much value and so much knowledge you gave us today. Personally, for me, it was my favorite meeting so far. It's my favorite event so far. So thank you so much for coming today.
My pleasure. And thank you for having me, Dimitri. Thank you, Nada, for inviting me. I appreciate the opportunity to chat today. And I wish you all, your own successful journeys, whatever it means being an entrepreneur. It is a hard path. It is way easier to just go to the recruiting office and say, okay, find me a job in a corporate role. But it turns out, I think of being an entrepreneur as one of the most rewarding things I've ever done. It's also one of the craziest things I've ever done. But, I persevered and I think it's going to work out all in all. I still don't know what I want to do when I grow up, but I do know that I want to have a lot more control over what I do with those 80% of my time that I'm awake. And being an entrepreneur gives me a lot more options there. So thank you again for this opportunity today.
Man, I think we can cut off some pieces of this meeting and just write some 3 or 4 other books for your company, just all this one event. So again, thank you guys for coming too. Just a quick announcement, next week at the same time, same link, we'll have Nathan Levin, who is the CEO of Climate Change Creamery, also BC alumni. It is part of our sustainability week. He'll talk about building sustainable business. Thank you so much, guys, for coming, and I'll see you all next week.
Thank you,
Take care.
everyone. Thank you, James.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.